Remember this number, 30%. That is the difference between how often men reach orgasm during sex compared to their female partners. Study after study shows this gap across tens of thousands of people in short relationships, long marriages, happy couples, and even those who say they feel close and connected. But before we blame age, biology, or compatibility, the truth is this gap is not caused by anatomy itself. It is not caused by getting older. It is not even about not being sexually compatible. In most cases, it comes down to one simple thing. Men were never properly taught. And once you understand it, everything about sexual connection starts to change. My name is Dr. Julia Roos. I'm a certified men's sex therapist, and I've spent over 10 years working closely with men and couples around sexual health and intimacy. In that time, I've seen the same pattern again and again. Men feeling confused, frustrated, or quietly worried that their partner seems less satisfied. And I've also seen what happens when they finally receive clear, accurate information. Their relationships don't fall apart, they improve. Not because they become different men, but because they finally understand what was missing. That is the purpose of this conversation. Real, research-based understanding. No outdated myths, no guessing, just clarity that actually helps. Let's talk about the orgasm gap more clearly. This is not a vague idea. Large research published in respected journals on human sexuality involving more than 50,000 adults found a consistent pattern. About 95% of heterosexual men say they usually or always orgasm during sex, while only around 65% of heterosexual women report the same. The difference stays consistent across different countries and studies. Now, this is not about turning sex into a competition or reducing intimacy to a score. Orgasm is not the only measure of satisfaction. For many women, emotional closeness, feeling safe, and feeling connected matter just as much, sometimes more. But the gap still matters because it points to something deeper. A lack of shared understanding, not lack of desire, not lack of attraction. A gap in knowledge. Most men were never properly taught how female sexual response actually works. What they learned about sex was often incomplete or centered almost entirely around penetration. Female pleasure was often described as complicated or unclear, when in reality the issue was missing education, not mystery. When we look at anatomy, things become clearer. Modern research, especially work that became widely recognized in the late 1990s, showed that the clitoris is not just a small external part. It is part of a much larger internal structure. It has branches that extend inside the body and surrounds parts of the vaginal canal. What many people casually refer to as separate areas are actually connected parts of one system designed for pleasure. This matters because it changes the entire way we understand stimulation. Female pleasure is not random or vague. It is physical, structured, and very responsive when understood correctly. Large clinical studies on sexual response show something very important. A significant number of women either need direct clitoral stimulation to reach orgasm or strongly prefer it for higher satisfaction. In simple terms, for most women, clitoral stimulation is not optional. It is central. Yet culturally, many men are still taught that penetration alone is the main event. The mismatch between what is taught and how the body actually works is one of the biggest reasons the orgasm gap exists. This is not about skill or performance. It is about attention and understanding. Many women experience greater satisfaction when stimulation is focused on what their body is actually designed to, rather than relying on penetration alone. Things like patience, presence, and awareness of what feels good make a much bigger difference than most people realize. But there is another layer that is just as important: emotional safety. Research on female arousal shows that the mind and body do not work separately. There is a kind of internal system that responds to signals of safety or stress. When a woman feels emotionally relaxed, desired, and connected, her body becomes more responsive. When she feels stressed, unseen, pressured, or emotionally distant, her body can naturally resist arousal, even if physical stimulation is present. In other words, the body has an accelerator and a brake. The accelerator responds to desire, touch, and emotional closeness. The brake responds to stress, tension, or emotional discomfort. And for many women, the brake system is much more sensitive. This means that no matter how technically correct the physical approach is, if emotional safety is missing, the body may not fully open to the experience. So, the real answer to the 30% gap is not just physical technique. It is understanding both sides, the body and the emotional experience. When both are aligned, when knowledge, attention, and emotional presence come together, connection becomes much deeper and satisfaction becomes shared instead of uneven. And that is the shift this kind of understanding creates. Remember this number 30%. That is the gap between how often men reach orgasm in sex compared to women. Across large studies with tens of thousands of people, this pattern keeps repeating in long-term couples, new relationships, happy marriages, and everything in between. But before blaming age, biology, or compatibility, the truth is this. The gap is not mainly about anatomy. It is not about getting older. In most cases, it comes down to one simple missing piece, something many men were never properly taught. And once you understand it, everything about intimacy starts to shift. This is not about judgment or performance. It is about understanding. Emotional safety is not separate from physical arousal in a woman's sexual response. For most women, it is the starting point. It is what allows the body to fully open. In real life, emotional safety looks simple but powerful. It is a relationship where she feels seen as a whole person, not just a sexual partner. Where appreciation is expressed often, not only in private moments. Where conflict is repaired instead of left to build silently. Where she can share needs or preferences without fear of criticism, defensiveness, or dismissal. For many men over 60, this part carries real weight. Years of habits in a relationship do not disappear overnight, but they can change through consistent attention. Men who begin to invest in emotional connection outside the bedroom often notice the biggest transformation inside it. Because intimacy does not start in the bedroom, it starts in how two people treat each other every day. Another important shift is slowing down. If there is one change that creates the biggest improvement, it is this: take more time. Research on sexual satisfaction consistently shows that women often want more time, not more technique. More time for touch, more time for connection, more time before any focus on penetration. What many people call foreplay is not a warm-up for her. For most women, it is the main experience. Physiologically, female arousal usually takes longer to build. The body needs time for full comfort, lubrication, and responsiveness. Studies often show that many women need around 20 minutes or more of arousal-building stimulation before penetration feels fully comfortable and pleasurable. Yet in reality, many couples spend far less time than that. For men over 60, there's something important here. Aging naturally encourages a slower sexual rhythm, and instead of seeing that as a loss, it can actually become an advantage. Slower pace often matches what a partner has needed all along. Many men who embrace this change find their connection becomes deeper, more relaxed, and more satisfying for both people. Her body also changes with time. After menopause, estrogen levels drop, which can affect vaginal tissue elasticity and natural lubrication. This does not reduce desire. Many women remain deeply interested in intimacy, but it does mean the body may need more time, more care, and sometimes simple adjustments like lubrication or gentler pacing. What matters most is attitude. When a man responds to these changes with patience instead of frustration, and with curiosity instead of assumption, it sends a powerful message. She is still desired, still valued, still important. That alone can increase emotional openness and physical response. A communication is the final bridge. Most women do not fully express what they want sexually. Not because they don't know, but because the environment often doesn't feel safe enough for honest conversation. That means many couples rely on assumptions instead of clarity. The couples who improve the most are the ones who learn to talk openly outside the bedroom, not in a moment of pressure, but in calm, everyday situations. Asking simple things like, what feels good? What could be better? Or what she would like more of can completely change the dynamic. The key is listening without defensiveness and responding with care instead of ego. When communication becomes two-sided, when both people share openly, it stops being feedback and becomes connection. In the end, the 30% gap is not a mystery. It is a combination of missing education, emotional disconnect, rushed pacing, and lack of communication. None of it is fixed or permanent. With awareness, patience, and emotional presence, the experience changes for both partners. Because real intimacy is not about performance, it is about understanding, and that is what transforms everything. In conclusion, the so-called 30% gap is not a fixed biological problem. It is a reflection of missing understanding, emotional disconnect, and rushed intimacy. Most of what shapes a woman's sexual satisfaction is not just physical technique, but emotional safety, patience, communication, and feeling genuinely seen and valued in the relationship. When a man slows down, pays attention, and creates space for honest connection outside the bedroom, everything inside it begins to change naturally, especially in long-term relationships in later life. Small shifts in awareness, care, and communication can completely transform intimacy. At its core, this is not about performance. It is about understanding your partner as a whole person and building a deeper, more connected experience.